Hi everyone, cheers for joining us today. My name's Ben Bennett. For those of you who don't know me, I am a 23-year sales veteran in B2B outbound. I'm one of those tragic individuals that love sales and selling, and I'm very keen on looking at future trends, topics, the things that are going well, the things that are not, and how our space is evolving over time. But you don't just need to hear from me. So today I've invited my good friend Gerry Hill along to join us. Gerry, great to
Yeah.
have you with us. And yeah, for those that don't know you, please tell us a little bit more about you.
Yeah, similar. Absolute sales process fanatic, I think would be the way to describe it. Again, 21 years in B2B software and services. Started my career in management consulting, and I'm now really heavily involved in sort of R&D and testing for demand generation and outbound initiatives. So,
Which
yeah.
is quickly becoming a massive, massive topic, which no doubt we'll dive into. So I'm going to kick us off with something pretty broad. What do you see across the businesses you're in and advising and supporting right now? What are the biggest pipeline drivers, and how good is the data supporting those initiatives?
Yeah, I think there's more just an acceptance that constraints are the hardest they've ever been.
Yeah.
Um, Part of it's a macroeconomic issue, part of it is just simply being overwhelmed with choice. And the third element is defining and executing what great propositions and offers look like. Um, Probably could sustain itself for 24 months, 4 or 5 years ago. Now it can't sustain itself for more than 6, 7, 8 weeks because pace of change is so high.
Yeah.
So people that don't have an acute lens on their sort of listening element of their processes are going to fail. People that are going to win are the ones that can sort of identify signal, adapt, move fast, and then re-optimize for whatever channel that they need to be participating in.
So you talk about signal there and being quite reflective in, I guess, the conversations that people are having, and yeah, new technologies, new processes, the overwhelm of tech. But the big piece, I think, is about listening to that customer and the timing, right? So you talk about the signal again, and I think the thing I want to explore is, would you rather put the olden days more in the top of the funnel and have more conversations and just seeing what converts, or is it about really paring everything back and finding that right opportunity at the right time, i.e., better timed outreach?
Yeah, I think so. But I still have a degree of dissonance around the fact that you still need to cover a market. Um, So there are two conflicting tactics that a lot of people seem to deploy,
Yeah.
but they resource for one, not both, which is probably why there's an inherent struggle to actually identify where people should be placing their bets more readily. I'm a great believer that outbound allows you to stumble into situations that you wouldn't otherwise have uncovered
Yeah. Yeah.
before if you're reliant exclusively on one tactic. So I get a little bit frustrated when I see people over invest in intent and underinvest in pure market exploration and
Yeah.
curiosity. I don't think either strategy is mutually exclusive though, and there are ways that you can run both simultaneously to get what you need to get from a market. I think the other thing that most people never ever seem to accept is outbound has got one phenomenal use case that hardly anyone ever discusses, which is this idea of market reconnaissance or research. I can get into a market, I can position offers, questions, curiosity inducing statements, and figure out pretty quickly where my failure points are. I can build trust with people through outbound in a slightly different way, which allows me to create follow ups for timing in the future. And I think the other third element is virtually all of your competitors are figuring out how to hoover up soft demand.
Yeah.
And that's going to be fine for 1, maybe 2 quarters of growth. But after that, where do you turn to?
Yeah.
Um, so if I can build a process and a system that allows me to take advantage of some of the soft demand, but at the same time explore the market sufficiently well, 3, 4, 5 quarters into the future, I'm probably going to be ahead of everybody else when those people come into market. So I think it's that one twisted belief, which needs to be much more present when people are thinking about their strategy design moving forward. But again, people are just so hamstrung by meeting as leading indicator versus
Yeah, yeah.
conversation as leading indicator, that nobody really ever knows what to do with it.
And I think that's really symptomatic of days gone by where, I mean, the VC-backed software world pretty much created the SDR role to have an
Yep.
efficient top of funnel pipe. Let's just assume that 1,000 go in, 500 move to the next stage, 250 go to proposal, and it becomes a mathematical equation of certainty, right? And certainly the things I've witnessed are you run those processes over and over again and you strangle your market,
Yep.
and then you've got nowhere to go, and that's your one play done. So there are still businesses that perhaps aren't at the forefront of go to market understanding that, typical organizations, like it might be events, publishing, traditional media, whatever it is, that aren't so well adept to using tech or upfront data, that are still burning through their total addressable market by hiring more and more people to
Mm.
make more and more phone calls. What's the message you've got for them, given what you've just said?
Well, I think a lot of those companies don't actually understand the unique value of their offer, which is they're sitting on top of insights that a market would care about listening to.
Yep.
So if all you do is go to market with the offer, not the actual insight that somebody might trust you against, you're always going to fail. I think one of the benefits of having grown up at a research and analytics and consulting house like Frost and Sullivan was we were always able to talk with authority about a problem set, and that generally was sufficient enough to get us meetings or get us in rooms with people.
Yep.
If I look at businesses like YouGov, if I look at businesses like The Economist, they're not potentially mobilizing their top of funnel based on the unique perspectives that they have or points of view. And every business should have a unique perspective. And that's the one thing that I think people need to anchor on more and more. It doesn't matter if you're in fintech or insurance services, or if you're in B2B revenue technology or marketing, professional marketing services, have a unique perspective, create content to that, adopt that message in every single channel, and change the nature of your call to action from will you take a meeting to can I send you something of value? Can
Yeah.
I invite you to something of value? Can I share a perspective that somebody that looks a bit like you has experienced recently having worked with us? I think the softer call to action is just generally much more trustworthy than the hard call to action, and you don't burn your market or strangle your market, but you still get the one thing that you can control, which is volume and velocity. So I think that that's the big sort of shift, is that dynamic like content piece, which is how do I create enough content that sufficiently arms my sales force with unique things that I can leave with prospects, rather than, serving them up a conversation starter and then asking them for time.
Yep.
And that's where I think most people are crippled right now.
And this is the issue with a feedback loop, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that there's a lot of emphasis on let's get the best data, let's have the most conversations, let's fill the pipeline. Those conversations are happening, you're getting that insight, but there's a big disconnect between sales and
Yeah.
marketing. So marketing are about eyeballs, form fills, clicks. Sales are about conversion, and I've heard it. You've probably heard it countless times as
Yeah.
well. The salespeople say that the marketing leads are low quality, and the marketing team say the salespeople aren't qualifying the leads they send through well enough to convert them. Um, like, what needs to happen between those two departments to make sure that actually there is that feedback loop going into a marketing function or a sales enablement function to create assets and resources that the sales team can then take back to market? What do you think the easy win there is?
Well, I think with the technology capabilities that are on offer today, there's a huge amount where you don't actually need to do a lot manually to build that consensus and bridge those rivers.
Yeah,
If I've got an instance of Gong delivering all my call recordings from my prospecting conversations to my discovery conversations, and the AI is tagging and coding and creating moments, that should inevitably end up in the hands of the right people being product, right? Customer feedback on product and proposition from demos and other messaging calls. Marketing, so that I can actually realign my messaging to customer language, not field marketing language. That's generally the biggest gap, by
yeah,
the way. And then thirdly, how we can sort of recreate value and understand that the content assets that we're building actually have value in a field sales force, as opposed to just being something that we use at the top of the funnel. And one of the big issues that I see is not actually being able to cannibalize content that's been created and reinforce it in the sales part of the process. The other big contentious point that I've been championing for about 12 months now is I think that sales development should be renamed to market development, and
Yeah.
it should actually sit under marketing more than sales, because it is a market development function. 3% of the people you speak to will be in market right now. So why are we chasing and trying to convince when we could be paving the market with trust through conversations?
Yeah.
And
So you're one of the
then
very
use
few
the
people.
content behind that to drive ongoing value. Now, I'm an aggressive sales guy. So for me to come in with this perspective when my instincts are loving the sound of my own voice and trying to persuade people to my perspective, no, I've sat on so much data. I've seen so many sales motions. I've seen failure, failure, failure. And it's this idea that you can convince 100% of the people that you speak to every single day that what you have is of value to them at that specific moment in time. And it plays out across all channels, Ben. It's not just calling, right, which is where I spent a large amount of my time. It is email, it is social, it is events, it is all the other bits. It's all about relevance.
Yeah.
And unless you've got something where relevance compounds through good quality content and high quality conversations, then you can't build a market dominance machine in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, absolutely. What I was going to say was you are one of the few people that I completely agree with. There's lots of people out there that are like, this is how it needs to be, and this is the role, and it's going to change, and the machines are coming, and it doesn't need to be that way. And I think, let's look at what SDRs are doing. They're advertising.
Yeah,
They're
they're just an
building
ad unit.
awareness.
Yeah.
It's to build curiosity,
Yeah.
try and get a bit of intrigue going. They're not.
It's an ad unit with better conversion than SEO or PPC by 1,000%, thousands of percent improvement, but we don't treat the messaging as ad units. And I think where the biggest marketing sales friction exists, where humans interface with markets, is the fact that marketing has designed product messaging or field messaging. They haven't designed messaging which salespeople can actually practically deploy.
Yeah.
So if you think about the nature of all sales interactions, 9 times out of 10, they're ambushes where we're trying to take advantage of people being in a state that we can get them to comply with us. Well, no, they're in the car, they're in between meetings, they're doing a big deliverable for a board pack, they're, a day off, they could be at a golf event. It doesn't really matter where or what they're doing. The point is that we're ambushing them. So when we overwhelm them with product language and marketing taxonomy and category language, we give them convenient excuses to not engage with us.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the major issue I've got, which is that there's no empathy for the field, and it isn't sort of a practical relay of what somebody experiences as a consumer of something. Everybody's got a job to be done, and it's just broken down into economic and emotional. Whereas marketing looks at products and feature sets and then uses category language to define what the messaging should be. So we send people to war with the wrong stuff 9 times out of 10.
And if you are speaking with prospects, and you, as you say, it is an ambush. There's loads of people, if you're doing any sort of, keeping your finger on the pulse, that say that cold calling's dead because of that, and actually it's not courteous. People won't answer the phone. They shouldn't be talking. And then there's ways to better engage people through permission-based openers as one example. So announcing that this is potentially an advertising or a sales call, and giving people the option to get off the phone.
Yeah.
I personally am a big advocate because it's just courteous.
Yeah.
The way that you distribute that, the way that you adjust the words, I think are open to review and adaptation. But what's your view on that? I mean, are you happy to ambush and go straight in, or do you think softer touch is appropriate?
Like, I think the thing that separates sort of excellence in execution are people that are brave and bold enough to go out and get what they need and what they want. That's the whole point of taking something to market. If you look at the history of sales and marketing, we used to manufacture stuff that created inventory. People would buy stuff, and then we started building catalogs to see if we could distribute our stuff more readily, and then we ended up with like relationship salespeople that go out in the field and they read Dale Carnegie, and then after that, you've got the advent of sophisticated B2B sales around Spin and Neil Rackham and the whole institutionalization of behavior at places like Xerox and IBM. And then all of a sudden, you move from hardware to software where there's no implicit need, where the margins are through the roof. So where does all your funding go? You have to take things to market, which requires a certain degree of proactivity. My general sense of the world at the moment is you've got a lot of people that I would describe as general population employees who kind of expect things to happen. And
Yep.
then you've got people that, regardless of wherever in that timeline, that history of B2B, are go getters and they're hungry and they're going to be perceived as aggressive, but actually they're not. They're humble, they're acutely aware of if I do X, I get Y, and we shouldn't try and restrain that behavior because they're the outliers. They're the, square root of the workforce that does the most of the work.
Yep.
So that's still inherently important. As for the ambush, well, it's psychology, right? Nobody really likes. I don't watch adverts on YouTube anymore. I've paid for the premium service, which is bitter irony. But I hate seeing ad units. But I'll always listen to somebody versus asynchronous. But that's my preference.
Yep.
Guess what? 30% of your list will be somebody that prefers listening to another human than reading some content. 30%.
Yep.
That's a big part of your market that will be receptive enough to have not just one conversation with you in an ambush, but many conversations with you in an ambush. And then the nature of ambushing people, we do it all the time. We just suddenly think it's not polite in a different setting. It kind of doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
The one thing I'm trying to teach my 4.5-year-old is go and speak to strangers.
I was about to
Yeah.
say, because we are brought
Yeah.
up in a don't talk to strangers,
No.
don't disturb people.
I'm trying to bring him up. Go and speak to as many people as possible.
Yeah.
Like, we go to the coffee shop every Saturday morning. That's mine and his ritual. And he'll have whatever ridiculous pastry that he wants that day and his hot chocolate. And I'll indulge in a bacon sandwich and a mocha. I always make him walk through the crowd of people to go back to the kitchen and take the plate. It's not a courtesy thing. It's you don't want to do it because you're 4.5 and you don't want to walk past strangers.
Yeah.
You now need to speak to the 7 or 8 people that are between you and the kitchen.
Break these social contracts, break the fear.
Break it.
Yeah.
Think, ask, probe. And, the whole sales paradigm is a series of unnatural acts. So the more you make these unnatural acts normal, talk about money.
Yep.
Talk about asking for things that you want, not being scared to ask for things that you want. If you want something, what do you say?
Yep.
And those are kind of paradoxical because I certainly wasn't brought up like that. But actually, I think about the things that constrained my career. It's like, yeah, I don't want to be impolite or I don't want to actually assert myself. No, sometimes you have to do it and it's okay.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of, there's fear of looking stupid.
Yeah.
There's fear of failure.
Yeah.
I mean, we're conditioned to be fearful.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a lot more self-assured these days, certainly since becoming a dad.
Yeah.
A good few years ago now. But I think the removing any form of apology for being yourself.
Yep.
But certainly working with a lot of young people now is that they don't see that. They haven't got that necessarily that life experience. A lot of people are wired that way, and that's great. And they'll have great careers, as will those people that are a little bit more self-confident.
Look, and I think everybody's got a superpower. I think the generational shift's quite an interesting one to sort of focus on for a second because I think Gen Z's got superpowers that we never had, like access to knowledge, synthesized knowledge, like their ability. They're probably intellectually better than we were in a whole range of ways because they can access information and are savvy with that. Whereas my attempt to access information is to ask a question and then ask another question. I think for a sort of Gen Zer, it's, well, I know how to get the information. I now need to synthesize the information. And then they've lived their lives universally asynchronously, whereas we didn't. I still remember in 1991 asking a girl out and to the cinema and having to sort of get through her dad on a phone call to her house on a Thursday night with 2 landlines in my house and my dad picking up halfway through to see if I was done. Right? How many 24, 25-year-old first jobbers who are trying to do sales development ever had to deal with any of that stuff?
Yep.
Never.
So you're an early cold caller.
Right. So, yeah, but that was just the nature of it. Going and asking your mates out because we couldn't organise anything. Having to get past Simon's mum at number 13, who was the most fierce woman on the street. Like, all of these small micro behaviours condition you and move you forward. So there are certain things that just universally seem a bit more acceptable. I also think it's easier to chase like an outcome from a sort of Gen X, early millennial point of view where things were still obtainable. in a slightly different way. I think for a lot of kids today, like the home ownership dream feels so much further
Yeah,
away
yeah,
than it
right.
did for us. So what motivated me at 21 when I entered the workforce was binary. Money, 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 money.
Yep.
Now I need to revisit my rewards, my incentives, how I program for that kind of stuff. Like it's a completely different playbook now.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I'm really fearful as a leader is kind of getting exposed on some of that generational shift at times. It's like, am I savvy enough to identify these social cues that I really don't have any real sympathy for, because I live in a completely different world.
It is fascinating. I think the bit that I enjoy about this new generation of sellers coming through is the speed.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right. The intelligence, the speed, probably a lot more emotionally mature, grounded. Um, when I got into the world of selling too many decades ago, exactly that. It was I work to earn, to spend
Hmm.
and accumulate. And it was a bit vanity. It
Yeah,
wasn't
massive.
about doing good in the world. It was just about how many pounds and pence can I get into my bank account so that I can splurge and have a great time. No real view for the future. And I think, we've got a far better educated workforce coming through. But with that are these ways they use technology to communicate, right? So, slight tangent in the fact that now it's very easy to WhatsApp, quick voice note or
Yeah.
quick message or a DM here or whatever it is. So working in a world where I'm a massive advocate of human to human verbal conversation, if you hand a phone to a Gen Zer, it's fear,
Yeah.
immediate fear. And this is something that I try and work with people on, is to overcome that, because you need to speak to strangers. You can ask for help. We are just learning. We're not always on the take.
Yeah.
So for me, phone is the channel. And regardless of age, there's fear across
Yeah.
using that as a channel. And I think because these societal norms that we've had growing up, I want to know about your experience in, obviously, phone is a big part of your work and life as well. How phone fits into a modern go-to-market motion at scale or at
Mm.
lower volumes, um, and what do you think the pros and cons are of the other channels that might surround it, such as LinkedIn and
Yeah.
email as well?
I work on a hypothesis that every channel's valid. I don't work on a belief that every channel strung together is valid. I'd rather mutually exclusively cover a market in a channel first and collect evidence of where people's preferences lie in my prospect base. So right now I'm working on a project with chief risk officers in major institutions, financial institutions, specifically talking about defensible machine learning models for things like credit risk, credit control, and really, really high value streams. Hyper segmented lists all around specific job role, very curated messaging around the economic, social, and political sort of environments they're all facing. Not overly researched though.
Yep.
I just want to see whether or not the hypothesis stands up. Test number one is, do they pick up the phone after 8 dial attempts? If they do, I can have a very brief conversation which invites them to accept a report, look at a dinner invite, look at a webinar invite, whatever. I'm not looking to set a meeting with them. As soon as I've got to those 8 dial attempts, rather than universally emailing the whole list in tandem, I park everybody that's picked up the phone and I create my follow up with
Yep.
that. Then I go to email. Then I, as a last ditch, will go to LinkedIn. And the reason I do that is the whole point of outbound anything is to be an ambush. If I know it's coming, I can move away from it. And the evidence on all engagement processes and tools shows that to be true. So mutually exclusive by channel, by list, by audience, by message gives me 4 sincere touch points that I can measure. And then I can contrast and compare and see where my best bets are for that very specific cohort
Yeah.
within my pursuit, my quest, my mission, whatever I want to call it. Why do I like phone so much? It's just a visceral amount of feedback that you can get that you can't get from any other channel. So somebody can say no to me, but in 5 different ways. No, not me. I'm not the right person. Go and speak to Ben. No, not now. I get timing. No, not you. I'm working with an existing vendor, or I've taken umbrage at your unique perspective.
Yep.
No, never. Actually, I'm misdiagnosed on the list. I've retired. I don't work there anymore. And then lastly, yeses, and that's a very small amount. Like all marketing activity, if you get 1 to 8% conversion, well done you. But for me, it's just activate and activate and activate. So
Yeah.
I think about everything as an activation, and then I've got information which allows me to follow up precisely, realign my list to the strategy, and then I've got things that I can present back to my board and say, of these 12 different cohorts that we've looked at in these companies, this is what we think is the right play.
So I think for anyone watching this, that if they are running a sales team, if they're looking to build out a framework like that that goes beyond, there you go, rep A, there's 1,000 accounts, go break into them. We need more structure.
Yeah.
So that is looking at, taking your advice here, is phone first as the channel. Can you get direct dials and mobile numbers? And we can discuss routes to market as well, through the phone. Then we need to know what the outcomes of those calls are. So you need to set up dispositions. So have you got, it's a no, not me, it's a no, not now, it's a no, never, it's a yes, and it's a, there's a competitor one. So
No, not you.
no, not,
Yeah.
sorry, incorrect person. So then when you've got that, you're measuring what's happening in the conversations themselves, but those dispositions should then sit across multiple campaigns based on role.
Yeah, you want to try and standardize as much as possible because then you get much more precision.
Yeah.
If you try and sort of taper to the unique needs of every list, you're not measuring for anything specific.
Yeah.
One of the biggest frustrations I've always seen, and this is from my last job at Connect and Sell, people would set up these massive disposition sets and they were overwhelming for the rep because they couldn't remember the enablement.
Yeah.
When it came to the measurement, it was just this pie chart of nothingness. There was nothing clustered around a specific signal at all. And then you could never really sort of drive any sort of follow-up automation that you might have built into your system at that point. So simplicity's king for dispositions. And then you can measure. And the reality is that most people don't really have a very organized process for this. So again, it's a sort of symptomatic thing, it's a will to manage piece. I'm very prescriptive on how my teams are set up. So I will run very, very specific plays through Monday to Friday. Monday, everybody, regardless of whether or not you're an SMB rep, an enterprise rep, or a commercial rep, has to execute on that day's avatar. The avatar being your kind of job title for the day.
Yep.
You work your bucket 4 as soon as you come into the office, which is kind of like your follow-ups for setting meetings. Will you show up tomorrow? What can I send you? Bucket 3 are people that you're working, haven't committed to anything yet, but are kind of like vaguely interested in whatever it was that you said about.
Yep.
Bucket 2 are your more sort of implicit follow-ups where you might have been hung up, brushed off, but people picked up. And then bucket 4 is your cold list. That's a 2-hour concentrated block of work that everybody has to execute. They also get briefed on the message for that avatar for that day. They also have an enablement function which delivers them the list.
Yep.
And then one of the benefits of that is every single person curates on message and list. And then we get a feedback session at the end of the day where everybody can say, this worked, this didn't work, this is what we saw.
And that feedback loop is fast if it's daily.
Daily.
The thing that I really like about what you've just said is the...
oh, and by the way, you still get like 6 hours of your working day back to be constructive and creative around.
Give them another list.
Well, you could do that.
Yeah, the thing that I find...
size market, right?
Really, yeah, absolutely. The prospecting and data gathering taken away from reps. This stat blew my mind when I heard it, but over 50% of an outbound rep's time is spent sourcing their own data and numbers. So if you just employed a person part-time or even outsourced it, you'd double your sales team overnight.
But I think it's more acute than that. We're asking people who are inherently talker, listener, left brain, emotional, persuasive, high alpha potentially personalities to go and do something which is completely alien to them, which is to be a world-class analyst.
Yep.
And the attention to detail to require to build sufficiently good lists is tough. And what happens is you drift from strategy. And one of my best ever mentors, Chris Bill, used to say the list is the company's strategy. So why don't the executives build the list? There's nothing more important than the strategy interfacing with the market. So why would you have your most junior resource building list? And the common sense, the sheer common sense of that is incredible to me. And then also cannibalizes cost massively. If I've got a Zoom info license spread across 60 people, or I could concentrate it into one person who then has an SLA to deliver the list to 60 people, guess where the cost efficiency is? You might go, speed. But actually, it's a misnomer because speed is predicated on quality. And it's a bit of a cliche, but, what was the old Abraham Lincoln quote? If you give me 6 hours to cut down a tree, I'll spend 4 hours sharpening an axe.
Yep.
I'd rather there's an axe sharpener in the business who can do that sufficiently
100%.
well than give it to an amateur to do that work and drift away from the strategy. And actually, that's the biggest problem in most go-to-market is drift. And it's not will or skill, it's just independence of thought. And frankly, this is going to sound the most controversial thing I'll probably say today, but I don't want independence of thought in my execution jobs in any way, shape, or form.
Controversial indeed.
I do want people who can synthesize information and give me accurate feedback, but I don't want people who are willing to drift because of their gut feeling on that.
Well, this gives inconsistency to outreach.
Yeah, exactly.
It breeds solo players, and I've seen this time and time again. I work with international sales teams and have been really lucky to look at sales functions in different cultures, and Americas and the UK and Europe is quite an interesting one in itself. But the amount of times I've been told, this is our best performer, we want more people achieving what they're achieving, and the simple question I ask is, what are they doing different to everybody else? Don't know.
Can't codify.
Because there's no playbooks.
Yep.
There's no standardization of process. Then ultimately we are successful on raw charisma and topic knowledge, which
but
you
somehow we
can't
celebrate that, right?
because they've been there the longest and they know the most, and aren't they amazing? We all want to be like that person until that person leaves and there's a hole because it isn't repeatable. And actually, if you're looking at it from a position of defensibility and sustainability, it's like, how can I codify what that individual is doing and scale it out? And that just comes down to playbooks and process, from data to the actual words that are coming out of their mouth, the questions that they're asking, because at least then you can go back to that conversational insight, use that insight. That question didn't work. It never lands. No one's ever got that problem. Rip it out.
I'm not a huge fan of the medpic mafia specifically, but I always remember working with an exceptional leader in one of the big sort of playbook companies about 2 years ago. And he was German. He was about 5 minutes late to our conversation. And he said, sorry, I'm late. I just needed to be on a call with one of my guys. I was expecting him to say 3 specific things, and he said 2 specific things.
Wow. What happened to that person?
I don't really know, but I think the key message there is that this is probably €150,000 a basic salary with a leader who's probably €300,000 a basic salary, both sat in the same prospecting conversation, and his one job was to observe and monitor for consistency and then lead against consistency. And the one thing that the PTC mafia, the medic mafia, do really well is teach their leaders to be sufficiently good leaders.
Yeah.
And that leadership is inherently a process of consistency. Again, I was away on a weekend with my dad recently at an old army reunion of his, and the consistency of behaviours from the 78-year-old at the top end of the range on this trip, age-wise, to the junior soldier who the MOD sent on this trip was amazing. And that all comes down to doctrine and leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're drilled. But it's repetitive.
Not a single person was late.
Yeah.
Not a single person messed up on dress code. Not a single person miscued on like belief systems and values in any way, shape, or form. And there's something inherently unprofessional about selling that really, really gets to me at times. And it's such an outdated belief that charisma, personality intersect with quality, because it generally doesn't either. And it's essentially, for me, the people that are willing to learn, execute, iterate, drive system and process and do that work sufficiently well. And by the way, if they do all of that well at 60% versus one person who does one bit of it at 100%, they're always going to outperform that one that one person who does the one thing at 100%.
Always. And it comes down to more recently as well. I think certainly when I was growing up in my sales jobs, it was about how do I become more capable?
Yeah.
What are my competencies? Where's my skill set being developed? And I think that has become far less important than
Yeah.
data,
Yeah.
the process, the timing.
Evidence.
And certainly something that's in the forefront now is credibility.
Yeah.
Everyone's got a platform. If it's just a LinkedIn profile or an account on X, whatever, everyone has got
Yeah.
a public profile. So part of sales, in my opinion, now, whether you're a mid-market exec, whether you are doing full-blown enterprise accounts and account-based marketing, you need to be present and trusted.
Yeah.
How do you see people doing that at scale effectively? If they're not going to get better skilled at doing their job, and obviously people will want them to get upskilled, but how do you build trust and credibility at scale?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I feel a bit conflicted about this at times because I know there are people with really strong points of view that work in major companies that can't ever really quite give their unique perspective on something. It's a control mechanism for the business, or it's very curated messaging, and so occasionally you'll see them drip feed some product update on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Or we're invited to, will you be there? And one of the big things that these mega companies haven't quite figured out is they've only got 50,000 followers on LinkedIn, but their best guy, maybe the leader of their professional services practice, has got 70,000 followers on LinkedIn, which amplifies the best.
Yep.
Right? People don't want to hear from companies. People want to hear from people because guess what? People buy from people. Companies don't buy anything ever. So I think that once you get through that sort of thrash, also people just don't feel confident projecting a point of view because they're worried about the consequences. I learned to really relinquish that constraint some time ago. And the one thing that I found with my LinkedIn presence, which is essentially where I got most of my credibility from in the medium term, was I was consistent.
Yep.
I showed up every day. I had something unique to say. I evidenced it in data. I wasn't scared to sort of shake a few trees along the way, but I never did it from a position of confrontation with people. It was, you've got beliefs, I've got data, my data says that you're wrong.
Yeah. But I think there is great showmanship's the wrong word, but I think there is great engagement and great discussion to be had when you've got polarizing views, right?
Yeah,
It's entertaining and educational.
Yeah.
And I think you need to stand for something and know something in order to make it
this current
valuable.
This current project that I'm involved in at the moment, CEO of the group texted me last night going, these are the 4 things that I think are wrong with our demand generation. Would you agree? And I went, yes. I didn't really expand on it. And then I applied some more thought. 20 minutes later, I went, here's a good example. We've got one of the absolute rock stars in data and data science for financial services. And I went onto his LinkedIn account and he's got like 4,000 followers and his last post was in April 2023. He's got a unique perspective. He's worked across the top stratas of some of the biggest institutions in the world. He's got an opinion. Why aren't we making him the rock star of our business?
Yeah.
If he doesn't want to do the work, I can find somebody to manage his LinkedIn account for him.
Yeah. And that, again, because LinkedIn is a channel, I think it's so often seen that you're the salesperson and therefore that's the only avenue. Yeah. But there is a lot more, and it is building awareness.
We used to do LinkedIn account takeovers at times with like CEOs of companies that we'd work with. We'll take over the LinkedIn, we'll push, we'll do all the messaging. You don't have to worry about it. So long as you're not worried about them looking in your inbox, then let somebody else do that work for you. But you need to grow your footprint, your presence. You need to be the rock star of this institution. And, we need magnets of work. Most of my LinkedIn content has always been about predictive objection handling as opposed to anything else. And that way I've got a steady curated body of work that I can deflect back to with anybody who says, well, what about this?
Yeah.
Oh, well, here's a LinkedIn post we did and it showcases this. What do you think? Then it's a much less invasive, tool, right?
Well, it's another sales resource.
Yeah, exactly. But again, there's always beliefs. LinkedIn's qualities are declining. It's become a cesspit for the demand gen industry to sell their agency services 9 times out of 10, which is frustrating for a lot of people. The people that are active there have to be active there. But I always joked about this. If I sold offers to CFOs, would I be active on LinkedIn? Probably not. You know, but I used to sell offers to CEOs of fast growth companies and to chief revenue officers of fast growth companies. That's where they live.
That's where they are.
So I have to be active
Yeah.
here. But, you know, ever since I've left that environment, my postings declined significantly.
So do you think what you were doing was scratching a personal itch just to vent? Was it deliberate sharing of knowledge? Was it a display of ability? Was it personal brand, or was it just
It was
that's
all
how you
of it.
felt?
It was all of it. And I was lucky enough to be in a situation where I could evidence things super fast. So I never ran out of ideas.
Yeah, yeah,
But the ideas were always consistent with the same themes. Your go to market is constrained by your seller, your list, your data, and your messaging. And if each and any one of those things ever falls out of cadence with the other thing, then you know you've got an observability moment where you can correct something.
yeah,
But if you don't believe that your entire proposition is centered around, can my seller deliver this? Is my list of sufficient quality for the people that I target? Is the data in that list and the feedback I get measurable and of sufficient quality? And then lastly, can I enable it and coach for it? Then you're screwed.
yeah.
And that was all. I was 6.5 years just banging that drum. List, rep, message, quality for coaching.
Now we've got, like you mentioned, Gong, but other tools are available.
There.
If you are recording things, if you are analyzing things, that becomes this virtuous circle, right? So we've got voice of market, we've got that immediate feedback loop from verbal conversations, we've got event attendees, all this human to human interaction being captured that should inform the machine. So the next iteration is improved.
But it doesn't.
Not for everyone.
No.
For my clients, it does.
No, I saw a phenomenal post from Mark Cosglow, who was kind of like the real sales leader at Outreach that took them from 10 to whatever. And he was referencing their relationships with call recorders before they built their own. And they loved it.
Yep.
Loved the technology, weren't scared to invest in it. And then the game changer for them was when Chorus suddenly released Who's Actually Listening. And it was the sellers. But guess what? Nobody got better because nobody was coaching them.
Yeah, yeah.
It was just a sophisticated notebook. So I think that unless you've got first line that's motivated to do the job of the first line, all of these technologies fail.
But I also think a lot of people are using recording insight, conversational insight, to improve the seller.
Yeah.
To help that deal over the line.
Yeah.
And I just think that's, like you say, 3% of the market. So we mentioned earlier before we sat down, it's like there's money in another man's muck.
Yeah.
And if we're looking at the 97% of conversations that go nowhere, that's where the gold is.
Yeah. And I think you can actually wire it up quite cheaply, quite cost effectively, in a way that enables the unique individual to go and deliver high quality work without being less reliant. So for a long time, I kind of disassociated myself from the official call recorder. I used it to cut and paste the call transcript. Now, my play was this. Inside a GPT notebook for each discovery process and each sales process, I would ask GPT, based on everything you know and this information that I'm feeding you, curate things that I should be thinking about for this account. So it would give me a unique point of view. I would then standardize my talk track. I would layer in the unique point of view into the conversation. I would then drag out the call recording, put it in, and I'd ask it 7 questions. Rate my conversation from a salesmanship point of view, quality of execution.
Yep.
Break apart the conversation into 3 different note-taking standards, right? So I'd have like a Cornell method, I'd have a mutually exclusive, and then I'd have like a second or first principles wrap around. What did I miss? What did I get? What did I not do well? Then prescribe my follow-up, and then make sure that we tease out the conversation any critical metrics that will incite somebody to want to take a second or third meeting with me. And that was the process. And then it would give me all this context outwardly. I didn't have to think too much, but I was precise.
But then you bring the skill to the framework that it's
bring the skill
presented
to
you
the
with.
framework.
So it
But
speeds
also the
everything up.
thinking into the framework. Whereas if I just rely on an off-the-shelf, semi-customizable conversation intelligence tool, I'm trying to build it for the organization, not for the individual, 9 times out of 10. And you know, I was in the car on the way down today. I was listening to a rugby podcast because I do that, and it was Mike Brown and Johnny May talking about Eddie Jones, and loved him initially because he was so good on systems, tactics, and processes, terrible on man management.
Right.
And I think sometimes when we prescribe systems, we overlook playing the man, not playing the system. So that's one of the biggest issues that I've got with quality of leadership, and then a lot of the technologies that we put in place is drive the system, not the individual.
Yep.
And so I think that there needs to be some adaptability. Now, if we assume that these technologies do a good enough job for us, then we buy back time to coach the man, ideally. But, again, that probably goes missing because nobody sort of prescribed into how to do that work particularly well.
But this then comes down to process enablement. And we've got the right tools.
Yeah.
Is this even your style?
Yeah.
Like we used to do a lot of LinkedIn outreach, video.
Yep.
Some people, just the second they put a camera in their face, wilted.
Mm.
It's like, stop working that channel.
We've got 3 of them looking at us now. It's
I
quite
know.
nerve-wracking.
I know. It's like you got your good side. But I mean, the idea really is that we've got different channels, different processes are going to serve different people.
Yeah.
And it's about having that right chess piece on the board, for want of a better analogy. What's something that, we're talking about enabling these people, enabling a process, using technology, using conversational insight. What is something that you're seeing work well beyond the initial ambush and try and get to a meeting? I think a lot of businesses struggle with is then using that knowledge, educational framework, AI insight to nurture relationships long term, not just one account, but how are you going to be nurturing groups of people so that they're not the 3% ready to buy now, but they might be in 4 months and you need to be the only option. How do you do that?
Well, I think it comes back to your segmentation, because you can build sort of custom journeys for people based on your segmentation. So if I think about this, there's a 12-month calendar of work, right? For your most senior executives, why aren't you initiating custom dinners? For your next layer of consensus, why aren't you building regional events? For your third layer, why aren't you inviting people through to content pillars? Why aren't you pre-recording all your demos so that you don't need to do custom demos to increase speed to value? These are the things that you can actually apply pretty rapidly and pretty quickly and consolidate against. Now, it may be that the event quality isn't great, but it largely doesn't matter because you've got something differentiated that you can ask people to attend and to participate in and be a part of.
Yep.
I think the one thing that most people are struggling with in 2025 is conditionally solving problems with no money to spend and fighting that in the context of time. If you've got an overarching boss who's looking at your calendar going, why are you taking so many vendor meetings? That's quite uncomfortable.
Yeah.
In much the same way that, people delay discretionary purchases, people go to a different place psychologically, which is safety. So by being able to show actually my transactions with you aren't around taking you to a place of risk, you're in a better place, right?
Yeah.
So you need to be able to provide a much more sort of robust, diversified demand program. That then becomes channel agnostic because the offer doesn't change based on the channel. The messaging changes because messaging dynamics are different in every channel. But I think that's the one thing. It's like soft call to action. Invite people to things where you've got an opportunity to then start the human engagement beyond a Zoom or a Microsoft Teams or a big war room meeting at the boardroom in Lloyd's. Those are things that are just too overwhelming for people to consolidate on.
Yeah, 100%.
And even if people say no, you get signals.
I think the thing that I enjoy when I'm exploring nurtures, and it can be deliberate and authentic at the same time, is I've grown my businesses, the companies that I support, through paying it forward.
Yeah.
And just not being that guy that's on the take.
Yeah.
And I think it's like, what can I do to help you? You've said these things, 20 other people said the same thing. We're going to do a breakfast and just talk this all through, and I'm going to give you the information. You can then, again, record it. Turn the recordings and the discussions into how-to guides, assets, resources. Bring the rest of the market up. It's like we had a meeting with 20 odd people and they discussed these things, and here's the guide. Do you want it as well? Give. And what's the follow-up? Did you use it yet? And so by the time you have your third, fourth conversation, they know Gerry. They know he's given me a resource to do something. They know he's tried to help my business. sure, why don't we sit down and have a one-to-one and look at
Yeah,
it, what it is that you do?
we ran a quick experiment last year where I think we took 30 hours of podcast recordings that we'd been involved in across the company, and we were able to slice that into 3,000 hours of short form content and give the
Lovely.
company a LinkedIn post. And actually, the human level to do that's not as required as it used to be. You can feed that into AI, give it its keywords, it will do all the transcription for you. You get back your sample videos of 30 seconds or less, and then you've got a much more sort of dynamic content pillar that you can leverage over and over and over and over again. So then there's no sunk cost fallacy, which is, oh, you took an hour out to go and record some stuff in a podcast situation. It's, well, no, this podcast is now creating the sound bites that psychologically people bite on the
Yep.
fastest. And then it's, well, how do you commoditize or make consumer content for B2B software or service selling? It's pretty easy because people are TikTok engaged or they're Instagram engaged. So you need to give people snippets, not long form.
Yeah.
But if they want long form, it's there and available.
And that's then turning, which is an old marketing trick of, I've got one piece or one body of work, it becomes shorts, it becomes long form blogs, it becomes short form how-to guides, it becomes social snippets.
Conference content is a game changer. You know, if I've got a keynote that I gave at a well-known established industry forum, I can slice and dice that into calling campaigns.
Yeah.
You know, the amount of people that don't call people that attended webinars, conferences it's negligent at best. You know, if it was a doctor not following up on a checklist, they'd go to prison for the absolute negligence we show in our industry at times.
Yeah. But I think these are learned behaviors.
Yeah.
Because there's this immediacy, right? We've been taught that I've got this monthly or this quarterly deadline, I must close now.
Yeah.
I haven't got time to build relationships because my VP's on my tail.
Yeah, and that's something I wrestle with all the time, which is short term, medium term, long term. And I actually think that there's a team composition model which potentially could come into the future framing, which isn't inbound, outbound, allbound, or any of that ridiculous language. It's, I've got a signals team, I've got a medium range team, and then I've got a long range team.
Yeah.
And then it becomes channel agnostic. Everybody runs the same plays. You just get differentiated data to run the plays against.
But specialisms again. And I think this is what's exciting about the evolution of where it's going. So the SDR was introduced to manage top of funnel so that reps didn't do the full 360.
Yeah.
Now we've got data teams powering leads into the SDRs, into the salespeople, hand off to customer success. Now we're looking at completely breaking that model in some industries to say, well, actually there is some near-term wins, and actually that's probably high velocity, high burnout, high frustration. Yeah. And then somebody like me, as an example, that I like building relationships, but I also like quick wins. I'd probably sit in that nice middle team. The long game, I don't know, I've got the attention span for.
Yeah, it's tough.
But it's understanding, actually, if we got people with, I don't know, they might be neurodiverse in certain aspects and really thrive in one environment, or those that are far more controlled and planners that exist in another. And I think we've got an opportunity to redesign it.
And you can measure for that as well. Like I'm a big fan of the Objective Management Group screening process, and their survey is incredibly predictive. I can screen for people that have got low hunt requirements for transactions on a daily basis versus people that like transactions on a daily basis.
So
I can configure around that, and then I can run adjacent plays. I think some of my biggest frustrations in my career have been when it's one play for everybody, and that doesn't necessarily yield. You've just got to anticipate the fact that there are certain people who are phenomenal at going into the head office of BP and walking up and down that building until they've met every single person. Might not have anything of value for that person right now, but Dom told me to meet you. I'm in the building. Let's have coffee.
Yeah.
All right. That's still a really valuable skill.
I think the what if, the where could you go, the how could you do it. One thing that people often miss when preaching online as well is what the business is that we're talking to.
Exactly right.
So we end up with media sales reps looking at what the software guys are doing and trying to adopt a model that isn't fit for their purpose. So where we talk about these sort of short, mid, long time relationship building, transactional views, does that fit most organizations for you?
No,
Where would that sit comfortably?
I think one of the sort of best and worst things that we've sort of seen is codification of sales process and process adherence. But at the same time, buyers don't care about your process.
Yeah.
Industries don't care about your process. What's short term or medium term for one category is totally fast for another. So what's the big enablement piece? I think it's situational awareness. If you create an environment where people can feel honest about where things land, as opposed to trying to obfuscate and force things into your systems, you're going to get much better businesses as a result, because you get the outcomes that you design for. And I've been obsessing over this recently for a range of reasons. Like, I transitioned an opportunity to somebody when I exited Connect and Sell, and it's still not landed, but it will.
Yeah.
But
You still work in the relationship?
No, I am, and I'm helping on it.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I get to be as objective as possible now, but I get to give honest feedback. Whereas before it was like, it might happen next month. So it's less vague, it's more specific. And that's one of the benefits of channel. Channels are massively overlooked play for outbound in general. I've seen some incredible innovation on using outbound teams and outbound tactics to develop channel recently that most people would overlook hugely. But why? Like, I've co-invested in a webinar with a partner. I've got 10,000 leads. The partner doesn't want to take responsibility for it, and the vendor doesn't want to take responsibility for it. So we've got 10,000 quid of sunk cost on this webinar, but we've got thousands of sign-ups. Why are we hoovering up that list?
Yeah.
Right? And it's just basics like that.
Yeah.
That are going missing. Just because you've put a naming convention to a strategy actually doesn't mean that you should be eliminating your behavioral stuff.
So I'm going to reflect on what we've been discussing. And I think what I'm hearing is a bunch of patterns. The market is going to know better than you in terms of what they want and what they need and how they receive it. The structure of outreach, be it, marketing or sales led, needs to evolve beyond volume and pure activity. Reps and associated employees or brand representatives, in essence, need to become value add assets and potentially media companies and trusted authorities in their own right, not just cogs in the machine. And that there is a lot to be done around experimentation, revision, iteration, and using insight to lead that. With that said, and these are all ideals and what should happen, and not everybody is ready to make such a quick leap. If you're in a more traditional business away from SaaS, it might be consultancy, media, events, what one role or one process change would you invest in that would significantly transform a sales organization within a company of that type?
Time blocking.
Okay, elaborate on that.
It goes back to that sort of superstructure, which is, okay, I've got an events business. Let's assume we organise B2B roundtables and dinners. Pretty simple offer. You either want it or you don't. You can either fund it or you can't. But the market for that's huge. And I've got a team of 60 people covering that market. But every time I walk onto that sales floor, it's quiet. That's not good for a business like that. My offer can be really sophisticated. I can sell stuff at £500,000 or 50 grand, but it's still quiet. Why aren't we organising the work and managing the work and demonstrating a will to manage the work? I guarantee you'd be more market dominant if you remove freedom from people's calendars.
Yeah.
Will I get as many people doing the work? I might get a huge amount of churn, but the people that stay will get 5x done. They'll get better at their craft faster, and they'll probably penetrate and close more than they would with the 2/3 of the labour force that left. And I've always believed this, but now that the technology vision is becoming the technology reality, you could probably fire 2/3 of most sales forces and triple revenue with the remaining third.
Yeah.
if you've got the ruthlessness and the ambition and the desire to do that.
And I think it doesn't even need to be tech enabled. Like, it needs to just be
Will to
efficient,
manage.
and
Yeah.
then throw the technology
Well, one
into
of my
enable.
biggest exercises whenever I do advisory work or when I was working at Connect and Sell, I would always say to a CRO or VP of sales, pick one of your best AEs who you claim can't prospect for themselves and show me their calendar for the week. And some of the stuff we saw,
White space.
walk, dog. No, you've got 40 hours. You've got another, 40 hours in your week.
Yeah.
You can do that stuff. I'm paying you for this slot of time.
Yeah.
Why haven't you designed for it?
And that comes into another conversation around work-life balance, the working from home environment.
Yeah.
And undoubtedly it is impacting output of companies and becoming more expensive for them.
And, probably in my last year at Connect and Sell, I was guilty of drifting because I was a bit complacent and stuff was coming to me. So I could do more on a Monday than I could potentially. And, I kind of probably exploited that a little bit at times. But actually, nobody who's ever sustainably successful figures out that being lazy is a good thing.
Yeah.
So your top performers are generally always your hardest working. That needs to be encouraged. And I think not hustle culture. It's not good for everybody. But actually, this isn't a good for everybody industry. So, yeah, I think we probably need to reinstate stuff that I experienced in 1999 that we don't experience anymore.
I think devolving the industry while
taking
being
it back to
enabled.
It's like the hierarchy of man, isn't it? It's like the evolution of man, where you go from chimp to whatever. I think we probably need to come back up the curve a little bit and stick some more hairy backs in rooms, and a bit
Speak for
more.
yourself.
No, because I do worry. Like, how can you get outsized returns, which is what the industry promises people that work in the industry, unless you're willing to advertise the fact that it requires outsized effort?
Yeah.
No amount of skill ever overcomes will in anything.
Yeah, I think the idea that you can walk into a sales role, get your 200, 300, 400k on target earnings for doing a bang mediocre job, days are over. Rightfully so.
Yeah, but you've also got to accept the fact that you can't deliver that promise, and maybe you should recalibrate the offer to the people that are going to come and work for you.
So, what's your thoughts on commission?
Some days I'm for it, some days I'm against it.
Yeah.
I generally think that it depends on your offer, it depends on the nature of your environment, it depends on whether or not you can actually execute and deliver it. I think I've seen recently in media and agency kind of world, salaries have exploded and bonus and bounty and commissions imploded. You don't see any proactivity at all at the moment.
Yeah.
I've seen other environments where you've got uncapped and the right performers chase that and want it and need it and desire it and execute on it. However, on the other side of it, if I'm an enterprise rep selling 3 accounts for Amazon Web Services, I need a high basic.
Yeah.
I generally believe that commission needs to be constructed around behavior as much as it does around outcome. And I think that's the big innovation that I'd like to see more of, which is imagine a world where what you do is rewarded by points. So you get an outcome composition, you get a points and behavior composition. We want people to do the right things consistently all of the time. So how do we capture that? CRM hygiene is important. Calling in on a switchboard and getting somebody's mobile phone's worth a point, right? That kind of stuff. Referrals are worth points. The things that nobody sees that actually compound. All of the philosophical stuff we've spoken about is largely meaningless if people don't understand its value day to day at the employee salesperson level. So points, gamification, micro incentives, they're the things that I think people actually probably respect the most, because outsized compensation comes from combination of luck, right time, right place.
Always. And you've got to wait a quarter for it.
My biggest ever deal, semi-inherited it. There was a small wedge in a key account, and I just happened to be able to develop that.
Yeah.
And the timing was right. Oil was above 110 a barrel, so they could fund the investment that they needed to at the right time. Honestly, 6 months earlier, 6 months later, it's not in play.
Yeah.
So yeah, you've just got to be aware of that. But knowing that the more you do of these micro behaviors every single day in the right way, stewarded well, policed and caught, I think that's generally where it needs to be headed
Yeah,
towards.
I agree.
Yeah.
Gamification,
Yeah.
discipline, tightening calendars.
Because smart people are always going to find ways to gamify the systems.
Always.
Always. So you might as well put that on for everybody.
Yeah.
Let's gamify it all. Let's turn all of this stuff into a massive computer game.
Yeah.
And I think that would generally lead to higher levels of
I
engagement.
think it brings more fun.
Yeah,
Like,
because it's not fun.
it's bloody stressful.
It's so hard.
It's really stressful.
Yeah, it's so hard. And I can't believe that I've sort of eked out 20 years of it, frankly.
You've seen the colour of my hair, right?
Yeah, I've seen the colour of my hair.
So sales,
it is
yeah,
brutal. It's not for everybody.
no, it isn't.
No.
So it has like there's a lot around preserving mental health and sanity in this world at the quest for what. And I think, you know, if you are treating people with respect, giving them fair remuneration, driving proper behavioural change, but also that they can take those behavioural shifts and developed understandings of selling and take them somewhere else. That's also great because it's then your job to keep the people that you've developed.
Yeah, I agree. I think the mental health one's quite interesting. It's important, but what I figure around high performers is that they generally got self-sufficiency built into their ego and their mindset anyway. They're inherently quite resilient, they're quite stoic, they find ways to deflect the pressure. Maybe some of that deflection is not healthy, maybe some of it is. Again, it comes back to this sort of concept of like culture of high performance and general population. And I was actually speaking to an HR exec the other day that said they swung so far to mental safety that the second they bring up a performance concern, guess what, that person signed off sick for 6 weeks, and it's always cited as mental health, whereas they never have that issue with top performance.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like the balancing act. Yeah, we care about your mental health and your mental safety, but at the same time, is it a crutch for not doing the things that you need to do as part of this job? And I don't know what the answer is on that, but yeah, it's just something that I'm thinking about and challenging and questioning more and more, because I worry about the convenience of it sometimes. And that's not to delegitimize the seriousness of it all, but I do think that bad actors are corrupting it, and people are starting to question it more and more.
Yeah, so I would say, but that's any industry,
any
level.
Yeah.
And it's
how many people corrupted COVID? How many people corrupted school colds and stuff? Like, it happens. People gamify it constantly. But yeah, I just think that, sometimes when I hear like the mental health trigger, I worry about sort of quality of performance and if it's an excuse. And I hate being cynical on it because I understand it seriously.
I think sales leadership forces you to be cynical, though, Gerry.
Yeah, all the time. Yeah, it can be quite an unpleasant place to be.
But you know why? It's because we were both salespeople. We know what we were like. So
yeah, there's an element of that, but you know, what can you do apart from trust people until you're consistently proven wrong? It's like parenting.
Yeah.
You know, and actually bringing up good sellers is a lot like parenting. You can't do it for them. You can only sort of signpost and guide and teach and coach, and they're still going to make massive mistakes. And that's fine.
And I think, you know, one of the things I'm really hopeful for my kids, you know, you mentioned your son earlier, making sure he's taking his plate out to the kitchen. It's like, my son wanted to work with animals, and he was like, "Can you take me to London Zoo?" I was like, "Unlikely to be able to get you a job there, but there is a farm a couple of miles down the road." And we went to the cafe, and in there, and I was like, "Go and ask that lady to speak to the person that looks after the animals." He's 7 years old, and he did, and they gave him a shift shoveling out animal muck, and they paid him with an egg. Absolutely golden. But he'll never forget that lesson, and I think they were lessons that I could never be taught as a kid. Like, yes, my parents had phenomenal work ethic, and I used to go on to building sites with my dad, and that probably taught me quite a lot. But being in a sales background and not passing on these social norms to my kids, I think is one of the best lessons I can teach them.
I'd agree. Yeah, it's sort of, you might not feel comfortable doing something, but you know that if you do it, you're going to get a good outcome from it.
Yeah.
Rather than just sort of hunkering back to safety and being like, I'm not going to pursue this. Because I'm worried about the social damage.
And I just want to say, if anyone is watching and listening, that just because we can do it doesn't mean that we don't still get hit by those fears
Oh,
and
I get it
anxieties
all the
around
time.
it.
Yeah.
It's like,
No, I was doing some cold call testing last week on this chief risk officer thing, and I was looking at these job titles and how impressive and tenured these subject matter experts are. I know nothing about risk in financial services, but I just had to nut down and get on with it and
yeah, yeah,
execute the message, and then hope that that 20 years of context and skill in those darker moments where somebody's like, "What is it?" I'm not going to explain what it is to you. I'm not the expert, but I know for Ben over at Acme Co, it solved these three problems, and
yeah.
my sense is you're probably experiencing that problem, or at least one of them, and hope that that's enough, right?
You're a rare
Yeah.
sales leader in the fact that you're still picking up the phone and doing the job.
My dad was telling me about something they used to do in the army, which was a Cold War training construct. It was tactical work without troops. So they would always do sort of field engagement without troops, experience scenarios before they could go on to train the troop.
Right.
You know, and I don't know how anyone can lead just through pure orchestration alone
Yeah,
unless they've experienced certain bits of where the bottlenecks, the constraints, and the failure points are going to be. Not for everybody. You know, there's the spreadsheet chief revenue officer, there's the board chief revenue officer, there's the love getting on a stage making a speech chief revenue officer with the Churchillian stuff. But actually, unless you've got some degree of showing somebody that you're willing to get into the trenches with them a little bit,
yeah,
and it's harder. The layer cake's real, and it's not always that easy to get down in the mud. But you need to. You have to.
absolutely. But also, the world has changed so much since the advent of AI
Yeah.
and or readily available AI at least. And I think what I was doing in my 20s doesn't exist today, and the world changed. And I'll do every bit I can to stay on top of it and work out what's going on because I'm curious and I care. But what I'm recognizing now is there are people out there way better at me at actually doing it, which is really exciting, really exciting.
But a bit frightening as well.
Yeah, so right. I'm that age now.
Yeah.
Listen, it's been amazing talking to you. I
Thank
think
you. Really
I've
fun
learned a
conversation.
lot. Hopefully, there's a fair bit to share.
Yeah.
Um, I'm going to digest a lot of this and probably ask you to contribute to a few resources as well
Yeah.
that we might be able to share with anyone
Happy to.
watching. But thanks again for your time.
My
Is
pleasure.
there any parting wisdom you want to leave?
Everything's predicated on strategy. Strategy's your list. Your list is who you want to target and why. You have data against that to understand whether or not your offer is sufficiently valuable. Recalibrate. No amount of talent can overcome fit. So speak to your market, figure out if there's a fit.
Absolutely agree. Pleasure. Cheers, Joey. Thanks a lot.